Welcome to this special Szeps Live event. We are speaking with Chris and Hamish, the co-founders of this very platform that we're on. They recently secured I think it's $1 billion in funding, did you? With a valuation of a quadrillion trillion
Yeah,
dollars?
I forget the exact
1.1
numbers.
Brazilian, etc.
$1 Brazilian
$1
$1 Brazilian, which is actually not very much money, apparently, given the Brazilian economy these days. And they're here to tell us about the future of Substack, what this whole platform is, where they see it going from here, and why Nazis are great. So now that we've established that, I want you guys to chime in on the question that is occupying all Australians' minds right now, which is, did my daughter pick out the right nail color? I took her to get her nails done. And we want to know whether or not this was a good choice.
I think I think the nail color is outstanding. The T-shirt choice, given the nail color already being there, is an interesting one because there's a little bit of a competition for the eye.
You know how to hurt a man, Hamish.
I just didn't want to offend your daughter.
Chris, yay or nay? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I think it's perfect. I think it goes with the shirt. I have terrible taste though, so it doesn't help you.
This is
don't qualify with that.
No, man. This is
don't qualify with that.
The Brazilian dollars.
Exactly. No, just say it was fabulous. I liked the first part of the answer, Chris. That was great. It's beautiful.
You can fix it in post.
Fix it in post. Exactly. That's right. We're gonna deploy an AI who can go through and scrub every frame and turn these a slightly lighter shade of purple so that they don't clash with my shirt so much. Do we have that functionality yet, Hamish, inside the app? Can it?
I think I actually saw Zach, our head of video, is actually watching this, so he's going to get right on there. Yeah,
fabulous, very good. I'm interested in what it's like to be a tech titan, which I think I can call you guys now. If I look at your to-do list, if you have such a thing, or your assistant's to-do list, then what is like? I think we can probably guess like what the top things are. What's like in the number 3 to number 5 range on? Let's start with you, Hamish, on your to-do list.
Me? No, I was looking. Chris is the tech titan. I'm merely a writer who fell into a tech company.
No, but it could be like laundry. But I assume you don't have to do that anymore.
I'm constantly doing laundry.
Why?
I don't do it at the office.
This is why Filipinos exist, Hamish. You're not supposed to be doing your own laundry. Not at this level of success.
That's an interesting, uncomfortable topic. I'll reserve my opinion on that. Number 3 and 5. Well, I think number 3 might be for me personally, might be maximizing or fully taking advantage of the opportunity for video and Substack and helping people who prefer to express themselves over video really have the power of a studio in their pocket. There's so much work to be done there. It's so exciting. And to marry that with the direct subscription model just presents so many amazing possibilities to me. So that's number 3, possibly 3 or 4 to me.
Okay. I would have put that at number 1, but Chris, what's your number 3 or 4?
He might put it at number 1.
I'm trying to forget about 2 through N. I mean, there's a saying in Silicon Valley where it's like the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I'm trying to, and I think with this, you raise money, you've got all of these resources, you've got all of these exciting opportunities. There's so many like people in your inbox with ideas. And I think that the most important thing that we can do now, that I can do now, is kind of like keep focused on what actually matters. And that's making a great product that actually delivers the value that people want. And for us, this phase of Substack, the great product, like the thing that's making it great, part of it is like the actual software we build, but a big part of it is the network and the value and the fact that other people are here and you kind of have this like increasing critical mass of things. So I'm actually making a deliberate effort to kind of like narrow my priority list and forget about whatever number 5 would be if I was keeping track of it.
And are those 2 goals, making the great product and making the community and the network work, always aligned?
I think for the thing that we're making, they're actually inseparable, right? The core of what Substack is not, a really good newsletter tool or a really good live video suite. Those things are very important means to an end. But the core of Substack is this business model that supports independence. The fact that you can actually, own your personal media empire and have this direct connection with your audience, but then plugging that in to an internet scale network that actually helps you grow and win. And if we like making that thing is what makes the product good. It's what makes it good for audiences because they can show up and the most interesting things in the world are here. And it makes it good for you because it being on Substack, then you can grow. You can reach an audience. You can make money doing the work you really believe in.
And when Hamish talks about the importance of video, do you concur with that, or is that slightly at odds with the original vision of having a newsletter platform?
Can you stop trying to create a rift between us?
By the end of this interview, the two of you, you're just going to leave your room and we're going to watch a mud wrestling match, essentially.
I knew that's where you wanted to go.
I think video is very much on course, right? Like the core of Substack is not any one medium or any one technology. The core is about the social contract and about the economic engine that supports the good things. And so we've always taken this stance of like, we want to give you sort of maximum creative leverage. If you're a writer, you should be able to come and type into this box. And if the things you type are great, you should be able to get rich and famous, and you shouldn't have to worry about anything else. That's hard enough. It's hard to make something great. And the things we're working on in video now are kind of like the equivalent of that. You should be able to show up and make and like, have the most interesting conversation in the world. And if you can have the most interesting conversation, which by the way is fucking hard to do, you should, like, as you know.
As evidence.
Thanks for the flattery, but yes.
But and then we want to make this set of tools that just like as if by magic takes that thing and like does everything else that you need to like have your own personal media empire. So it's very much in line to me.
And Hamish, when you hear Chris say that if you're a writer, you should be able to just come in, write in a box, and it should be able to make you successful. If the analog, thinking about the video analog of that, there's been up until now I would say a bias within Substack. I'm not saying that in a pejorative way, but a preference inside Substack to be a lo-fi place to do business on video, to basically make it rough and ready and quick, and you can pick up your phone and you can stream, and it's live and engaged and integrated and horizontal and all of those like nice networky things. Now there's a pressure from certain creators, myself included, to facilitate a greater polish, a greater level of professionalism, and to actually sort of step up and be an alternative to television and to big YouTube shows. How do you think about the clash between sort of spontaneity and lo-fi versus polish and hi-fi?
I think they can live together. I've always been a high-low kind of guy. Like you can go high and enjoy the highbrow stuff, and then go lowbrow, and like that's really fun too. And
Two jokes about Filipinos, for example.
Well, obviously, I would never go there.
Yeah, no, sorry. We'll cut it in post. It's all right.
Yeah.
Not live.
So I think that there is like a true quality to the unvarnished, direct conversation, which you can sort of casually drop into or casually create. And social media has kind of enabled that, and it's resulting in new types of media products and new types of media businesses being built. And I think it's actually shaping the culture and shaping our politics to a larger degree as well. But there is definitely a place for the more intentionally crafted, higher production value, deeper dive type of video as well. And to a large extent, that might be on Netflix or YouTube at the moment, but they're married to a particular type of model, which is that you either pay your attention to YouTube and it decides what to put in front of you, or you pay your money to Netflix and it decides who wins and who gets all the money. But there's definitely a big opening for a direct subscription relationship model where I pay Josh because I pay him directly because I want to be in a relationship with him, a professional media.
You want to be in a relationship with Josh? Breaking that.
You know nothing about my swinging, Hamish. You know nothing about my polyamory.
I am making some assumptions. I only want the media swinging part of this relationship.
Right. Okay. Great.
But I want to be able to go direct to the sources that I most trust and be able to support them not only with my attention viewing their work, but with my money so that I can help them succeed and have more of an agentic role in shaping the culture.
And if you're just joining us, we're speaking with the co-founders of Substack, Hamish and Chris, and this is an episode of Uncomfortable Conversations, also Szeps Live, which is what we call it when we're actually streaming it live. I've just gotten back from around the world, Substack Live podcast marathon, and the two co-founders are kind enough to join us to talk about the founding of Substack, the purpose of Substack, the future of Substack after a big round of funding that they've just enjoyed, which valued the company for the first time at more than $1 billion. Hamish, when you think about hi-fi versus lo-fi, and Chris, I'd like your thoughts on this as well. One thing that bothers me a little bit when I think about how to produce this show is, do people engage with it differently if it's polished? Like, is the experience, in other words, that Netflix phenomenon, is it not just that there's a financial difference between the business model of Netflix and the business model of a Substack creator, but that there's actually, like, let me give you an example, because my background was in radio. I would go on huge radio shows as a guest when I was like a presenter on HuffPost Live in New York that claimed to have 100 million viewers, listeners rather. I'd go on the Today Show and banter with like Kathy Lee and Hoda for 8 minutes, and they claim to have 50 million viewers or something. And I would get 1 or 2 text messages from some old person who was a friend of my mother who saw it. I would go on a podcast that had a really loyal listener base.
Yeah.
And they're big podcasts. They're still 10 million people or 5 million people. And my podcast would shoot to the number 1 spot on the Apple podcast rankings for the next 72 hours because of the engagement with which people consume podcasts versus just having the Today Show on in the background. And is part of the concern, if there is a concern at Substack about facilitating television on Substack, that you corrode the intimacy?
I don't think there's a concern, but I think there is increasingly like a time and place for the polished stuff. And that in general, people have learned to, I think this is I'm just sort of like rambling about personally how views about how the culture is changing. And Chris will have a much more intelligent and concise way to say something that reveals deeper truths. But I think that when someone sees something that is a polished piece of media these days, they're almost less inclined to trust it because it's a relic of a previous era where there was a much more centralized control and top-down gate-kept media where you got your official opinions from official voices, from people wearing official suits behind official desks with official backdrops and perfect productions and everything segmented into 2-minute blocks. And the internet broke that model. And now every perspective gets to have a voice and have a chance of being heard. And once people have been exposed to something like a 3-hour conversation between a podcaster and a guest, where you get to break out of the soundbite framework, then you start to want more of that and trust more of that and start to feel like the other thing is a little bit alien and more of a broadcast when you've been talked to rather than with. You've been told something rather than invited into sharing something. And so I think that's actually a really good quality of social media that's like introduced a new way of talking to each other in large groups. And it's going to be really hard to, I don't think we're going back to the old way, which is not to say that there's never a time or place for the high production value, high quality, like intentionally designed conversation or media product, but it's occupying a different place in the culture than it once did. It's no longer the default dominant thing.
Yeah. Chris, what sense do you make of the vibe difference?
I think that's true. And I think the podcast and the show, like the podcast as a format is, I think has been so successful in part because it gets at something, it forces people to have more authentic conversations in some way. Like when you sit down and you're talking for an hour or something, there's just a degree to which it becomes much harder to sort of fake or bullshit through. You know, if you've ever done media training of like how to go on TV, the training is like, all right, everything is a 30-second soundbite. Don't answer the fucking question. You just, whatever they say, you say one of these 3 things that you came to say. Say it confidently.
Just say that's an excellent question, Josh, which gives you a little bit of time to think about what you're going to say. And then
that's an excellent question, Josh. So on to why the Substack synergies are such excellent for growth. Like, and that's kind of, and that's just like how how the structure of that type of media and the incentives that it creates pull the participants to behave. And if you sit down and try and do like an hour-long podcast interview or a live, and you come at it with that kind of attitude, you're going to look like a moron. It's just impossible, I think, to have the same degree of like.
In fact, we have looked like morons in the past.
Yeah, listen, if I'm going to look like a moron, I'm going to look like the moron that I actually am, not the moron that the PR team thinks I should be.
That's a very good point, though. That's actually a good point, to look like the moron that you are instead of the moron that a PR team. I'm serious. I'm totally serious.
Let's be hanged for the crimes we actually committed if we must.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. And I think this was part of, not to get all political, but, when they talk about the podcast election in the last election between Trump and Kamala Harris, I do think that there's an expectation amongst Democratic Party machine people that you can avoid looking like an idiot altogether. And you can, but then you lose the election. You're going to have to lose, pick your idiot. Either you're going to look like the idiot that you are by doing podcasts and engaging and seeming authentic, which is what Trump does. Not that he doesn't look like an idiot, but he definitely looks like his own kind of sui generis idiot.
Well, have you followed Newsom's latest turn?
No, what's going on?
Oh man, he's tweeting in Trump's house style. He's making like parody Trump tweets and doing all. He's gone. I think he's taken the "if you can't beat him, join him" strategy.
Right.
It's interesting as a matter of media criticism.
Is he actually being satirical, or he's doing this inadvertently?
No, he's like, it's literally, it's like, thank you for your attention to this matter, like all caps, like he's doing, he's going for the bit. It's quite interesting.
Wow, that's interesting. So first,
he's been doing the podcast bro thing, as you
you talk to Steve Bannon on a podcast and all of it, and next step you're sending out tweets like the president. I mean, that's interesting. That's it's funny that the sort of beat that I've been that me and Andrew Sullivan and Barry Weiss and people like that have been banging on about for about 8 or 10 years is finally, like, there's a whole bunch of Johnny-come-latelys who are now jumping on the bandwagon, including the governor of California, who's like, oh, should we be talking to people outside our echo chamber, should we? I can do that as well. Watch me do podcast thing with other individual who disagrees with me. Not doing it in an incredibly effective way, I don't think. One of the viewers, Scoot, has asked a question saying, what was the thing in the pitch that helped secure the $100 million?
It's
the meme.
I'm going to say the meme. Yeah. No, I at one point I was trying to just because the craft of making a pitch is about taking the big idea that you have and just compressing it like a diamond down into the simplest possible expression of itself that's like the least distorted. And I ended up making a meme that was one of the slides in the pitch that I just felt like, even in my own mind, totally clarifying for like what Substack is. And the handshake meme where it's like two guys shaking hands. And it was basically like
muscular arms.
Muscular arms.
Oh, yeah,
one muscular arm is, look, it's the business model that supports independence. And the other muscular arm is an internet scale network. And you put those two things together, that's Substack. And I think that is probably like the key insight that we ourselves have come to over the years, which is like, we think this model is really important. We think the fact that you own your stuff and can have editorial freedom and can make money doing the work you believe in, that stuff really matters. And the model and the tools have to support that. But none of that actually matters if it's kind of like you're off on your own little island and you're totally dependent on all of the other networks that are just driving the world crazy, and if you can't grow. And so the thing that Substack can bring to, the thing that can give the Josh Szeps of the world sort of like a fighting chance to win back the culture and make a real difference, is by taking the promise of the Substack model and pairing it with a proper place on the internet that matters to the culture and helps you grow.
And when you say an internet scale network, what does that mean?
Pretty simply to me, it's like, look, the main device most people use every day is their phone. And on your phone, you have there's probably 3 or 4 little rectangles you go to. And
Grindr, Tinder.
Yeah, or, whatever those are for you. Everybody might have different ones. But there's there's probably whatever, 2 to 7, maybe at the outside. And I think if you're an independent creator, you have to be in those rectangles or you're just not in the conversation. And most of those rectangles are things that are like TikTok or YouTube or Grindr or whatever, are these networks that are governed by these incentive systems, like there's a certain way to win. And the way to win is determined by how that platform makes money and what their strategy is. And we think that to fulfill the best version of what Substack can be, like we have to like provide one of those rectangles, and we have to provide the one that says, we're going to connect you to the things you actually value.
I like that.
And if you,
finish that thought.
Oh, and just like, and if you want to do that, it has to be like it has to be a internet scale place with everything, right? You can't, in order to make that thing, you have to, you start to realize that you're going to make something that like, it has a feed, it has a way to like, it has all of the things that kind of go into making one of those things great.
Hamish, do you worry that it's getting too complicated? There are lots of bits and pieces that you're putting into this basket, which is going to become the everything app, right? You've got a social network in the form of notes. You've got video. You've got the posts. You've got chats. You've got like comments. There's some point at which the experience becomes more. There are more opportunities to do things, but that also makes it more unwieldy. So how do you balance how do you balance sleekness and
luckily,
functionality?
I don't have to design the product.
You don't have to do anything.
So
but your brain is like noodling on this. I love the idea that you just go home at night and you feed your cat and then you go to bed and you meditate and you have an ice bath and you don't think about any of these things. But I know you well enough to know that you do occasionally contemplate this stuff.
So actually, there's like to build an app that integrates the best of social media with the best of traditional media, like the values and the practices of each. It is a good design challenge, and I'm really glad that I get to work with amazing people who think about those problems in clear ways and come up with something that works. But what I actually think is that it is a movement for simplification, because the more complicated thing is that these little parts of our media lives are dispersed across the internet, where I might go to browse for good things to be engaged with or for new voices to fall in love with. Like previously, I might have gone to Twitter or Instagram, and those systems, their interests are not aligned with those voices that I want to support or that I really value. Or I'm, to read a long thing before Substack, or like a really meaty piece, I might have gone to the New Yorker or the New York Times or the Atlantic or whatever else, some other place, or gone to like watch a movie somewhere, a documentary. And my attention would be like distributed across these places that each have like a different model, none of which are necessarily aligned with delivering value to the people who make the good stuff. And with Substack, it gives you a place to have it all, like have your relationship with the smartest voices and the best culture in one place, where the browsing can happen in a way that is not turning everything into a doom scroll, and that delivers more power to the people who actually make the culture. And so even though it's complicated for us to nail the design challenge, I think it's, as an overall force, more simple and more powerful.
Yeah, and obviously lacks all of the downsides of living in an algorithmic echo chamber.
Well, yes. there's challenges to overcome, but yeah, like there are algorithms in Substack, but they do different jobs in the algorithms of the other places.
What's their job?
Now I hand it over to Chris.
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen,
this is a big piece of our philosophy, right? It's like what do we think about powerful technology? You think about algorithms, you think about long form and short form video, you think about feeds, you think about all of these things. If there are, if we think that the major networks on the internet are kind of driving us crazy, does that mean we should retreat from those technologies? Should we be like the Amish and say I will swear off algorithms. I will only wear natural fibers. I will, go back and live in the land and read newspapers on print. I think there will be people who do that, and I wish them well, but I don't think that that's the way forward. To me, the answer is like, we have to marshal the power of these amazing technologies in favor of the people who actually make and like support the culture. And so there is an algorithm on Substack, but where the algorithm on, let's say, X is designed to like extract as much time from you as possible so that it can sell it to advertisers, the algorithm on Substack is designed to help you find things that you value and fall in love with to the point where you might decide to pay for them. And by the way, once you decide to pay for them, we want to help you continue to like keep up with the content you aspire to keep up with, because then you're going to retain. And so the objective, we call it the objective function, is like the nerd speak. It's like, what is the algorithm trying to do? Right. And you can feel sometimes on these other platforms, it's like it's trying to like find the thing that pushes your buttons and drives you crazy and gets you hooked. And on Substack, at least the aspiration, and I think really the reality, if you use it, is it's trying to find you things that are transcendent, that you like, that you value.
But how do you measure that without falling into similar traps? Like the proxy that other social media platforms will use is something like the time you spend on the site, which by definition is, a good thing, because obviously you're having fun if you're spending a lot of time on the site. You'd be leaving it if you weren't, is the logic of the, of the Zuckerbergs and the Musks, right? Like, and obviously that then gets perverted into ridiculous, addictive clickbait. Similarly, engagement and connection. Zuckerberg talks about how connection is always a good thing, unless you're connecting an old lady in Missouri with a Russian hacker who's spreading disinformation about elections or something. But like that can't factor in because the metric isn't nuanced enough to catch that. How do you avoid falling into the trap of going, well, look, we're connecting people with lots of different great things on Substack. They're spending more time on the site. Obviously, investors are now going to be happy about that, but at the cost of people's, intellectual derangement.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting technical problems that we get to solve. And like eventually, there's an eventual answer. To me, the eventual answer is the thing you pay with on other platforms is your time, and the thing you pay with on Substack is your money. And when you sit back on a Sunday and you think as your best self, like, what do I want to invest my time in? What do I want to invest my money in? What's worth, $5 or $10 a month to like be something that I really want to support? You're going to make that decision, I think, as a slightly better version of yourself, right? It's a little bit different than what's going to get me to do one more scroll before I fall asleep, or like, should I scroll through this feed of things that are sort of prurient or whatever? And it's not perfect, right? At some point, that it is a way to give people agency. It's a way for people to express what they actually value. And some people are going to choose to spend money on things that are not what I would have chosen, or that I don't think are good. And ultimately, I still think that's a good thing to do. Basically, if I'm helping you make the decision by your own lights of considering everything you have to consider, what do you want to invest your money in? And I'm helping you make that decision well, I think we've done a good thing. Even if people are going to make radically different choices about what they spend that money on. So that's sort of like the deep answer. And that the key is that thing has to tie to the business model of the company, right? If we say, hey, we've got this aspiration to be really noble and to help the people who are actually using the thing get what they want, but then our business model is, well, actually we make money in this different way that is against what you want. Either you're going to run into a situation where you're, undercutting that principle, or where your business is not successful. And actually neither of those are good outcomes. So we have to design the whole business model of the company around the idea that, look, we are only going to make money when we're helping people discover things that they deeply value. So that's like the philosophical side. Then there's the technical side, which gets really interesting because payment is a really sparse signal, right? So you're going to pay for, if we're doing great, you're going to pay for a handful of Substacks over time. And so you do have to be able to work back. And, this is one of the things that we're working really hard on right now, are what are the early signals? What are the things that actually show that you're getting deep value out of something? Because we run tests, right? We run tests on the Substack algorithm. And sometimes we'll have an effect where it's time spent went up and number of scrolls went up, but reading long form content went down, and watching long form things went down, and paid subscriptions went down. And that's a really clear one, because it's well, if you're Twitter, you say yes, because you're going to make more money. If you're Substack, you say no, because that's actually, you're going to make less money and it's against the thing. But the key is finding the things where that are actually those early signals. What are the signs that you're finding something that you actually value and care about? And, engaging deeply with long form stuff. Again, that's something where on Substack, that's really good. If we're hey, we found you a long form thing to watch, we're great. That's helping.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have thoughts about that, Hamish?
Of course, I've got so many thoughts. My really basic thought though is, I'm really psyched as a writer, or a person who's formerly an independent writer, to have people like Chris and the people who I work with at Substack turning their attention to building magical technology machines that give more power to writers and creators. And I don't think any other company has had that as their guiding philosophy, really. And it's not like written into the code of their business model. And so I am have been unfortunately an habitual user of social media apps over the years and been stuck in all the feeds. And I'm much happier using a feed that has been designed to distribute power away from the platform and to the actual people who create the stuff of value on it. And so when I I get turned off, honestly, by words like objective function. I don't think normal people talk like that.
But we can translate. We can translate in our heads to what you nerds mean.
But I'm glad that the nerds are thinking of how to put algorithms in the people's favor rather than just in service of maximizing the extraction of attention so it can be turned into advertising dollars.
Yeah. You're watching Szeps Live. This is a live stream with Hamish and Chris, the co-founders of Substack. I've just gotten back from doing a big round-the-world podcast marathon where we hit a bunch of cities and spoke to some of the most interesting people on Substack, both live and on my podcast, Uncomfortable Conversations. This will also become an episode of Uncomfortable Conversations, so be sure to subscribe if you don't already. Chris, the obvious follow-up to what you were just articulating in terms of the priorities of how Substack thinks about success being sort of embedded in the very fabric of what it's trying to do is paid subscriptions and attention in a way that is more fulfilling than the doom scrolling of other social media sites, is the question of advertising. And some of the concerns around the $100 million funding raise, which you guys had just acquired, was, does that mean that there's going to be more pressure on faster profitability for the company? And could that see the introduction of ads, which contaminates the ideal that you were just articulating?
I think if anything, the fundraise, what it does, it gives us the space to kind of like plan long term and think, what is the biggest and best version of this thing that we can build, and what is the future that we can pull towards, and kind of like invest sort of ambitiously against that. The way that I think about the ads thing is, I do think there, like with any technology and like with any business solution, there's kind of like, there's good and bad ways to do it. And I think that the thing that we've seen in like the massive internet scale, like the Facebooks, the Twitters, the YouTubes, all of these places, is you kind of get this like, ad exchange where you say like, we're going to turn people, we're going to warehouse people's attention. We're going to completely separate that from the content they're watching and the context of what they're doing. We're going to treat them as this like commodity. We're going to collect this attention commodity, and then we're going to go and sell it to the highest bidder. And the more that we can collect, the better. That business model is like tremendously powerful, tremendously effective. Those companies make a ton of money for themselves. But it is kind of like the thing that at its core is creating, in our mind, like the broken incentive structure that Substack exists to create an alternative to. Now, does that mean that every type of advertising or sponsorship that ever happens is exactly the same as that thing? Like, I would say no. And so if you look at the question of like, for example, will there ever be sponsorships on Substack? The answer is, of course, there already are, right? There are tons of independent writers, creators, podcasters, new media companies that are flourishing on this ecosystem. And some of them are showing the way for themselves, without our help and without our involvement. But because you can put whatever you want in your Substack, there are people who are doing like really smart, I think, high-end sponsorship stuff. And I find that model very interesting because in some ways, it's kind of like it's the thing that switches the power, right? It switches the power to, I'm somebody that has this like, this high profile thing. I'm somebody, you have this direct relationship with the creator. I think I think there are things that we can explore that are already happening where the creators are showing the way, that are not only like don't fight against the quality, but actually reinforce the incentive for quality.
What would be an example of a good way of doing it? And what would be an example of a bad way of doing sponsorships and ads?
I mean, one thing that I saw happen that I thought was really interesting was, do you ever follow Lenny Rachitsky?
No.
He's a brilliant guy from the tech world. He was a product manager at Airbnb, and he started a Substack and a YouTube, and has become this very successful sort of like, he runs these interviews. He talks about the discipline of product management, kind of like all of the smart product people follow him. And from very early on, he has a YouTube channel that he has like sponsorships on, and it's like the high-end software people are like buying the things. But he added a thing to his Substack subscription that said, if you're a paid subscriber, you're also going to get like a year of these really good AI tools that cost a lot of money. And the sponsor's going to pay him for that, but also you as a paying subscriber are going to get this like deeply valuable thing. And I found that very interesting. I was kind of like, this is an interesting world where, as a subscriber, it's not like I'm paying and I'm getting like a bunch of ad reads to me. I'm paying and I'm also getting some like really valuable extra thing with my subscription. I find stuff like that very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, many of us are already sort of doing versions of that, in the sense that if people subscribe to Uncomfortable Conversations, then they can get like a 7-day free trial to Andrew Sullivan and Barry Weiss or something like that, and vice versa. And, so people are comping each other various things and incentivizing each other. But I do think there's a difference between an individual creator going out to the market, finding a sponsor who is consistent with their particular brand and the interests of their particular audience, and then making that arrangement, and that is a kind of ad hoc thing, versus presumably the way that it would have to be systematized in a place like Substack, where, for example, a creator could opt into a sponsorship package whereby all of a sudden my posts would have an ad for a semolina brand of breakfast cereal in the post.
I guess to me, that's the interesting question, right? It's like, is there a way, like, could we build something that has the good properties of that former thing, but that makes it easier and makes people make more money? And I think, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know exactly.
Maybe there
what
are
that
categories.
is.
Maybe there are like topic categories or something like that, where you opt in to add ads from particular segments of the market or something like that, so that
what are
they're
the North
consistent
Stars
with
here? The North Stars are, look, you should be in control. This is your space, your audience, your business. You're putting your name on the line. You should be the one that's in control. Easy as that. The other one is like, you should make as much money as possible, and be able to focus all of your energy on the stuff, on the editorial, on the things that you care about and believe in, right? Every hour that you spend on the phone selling sponsorships to somebody is an hour that you could have invested in having an interesting
talking
conversation.
to Chris and Hamish.
Talking to Chris and Hamish, or talking to somebody interesting. Whatever the schedule calls for that way. And so I don't I don't have a clear, we're in the very early stages. Like, our approach right now is we're actually learning from our customers. We're talking to people what they're doing today and learning like what's great and especially what like really works with their business and what they care about. So we don't know what the answers to all these things are, but this is just like how we would approach this.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned those two imperatives, being that I should own it, and also I shouldn't have to go around hustling and wasting my time from being the creator who I want to be. But there is another imperative, which is that I and fellow creators want to be part of a community and a network that is building a way of having conversations that is not contaminated either by massive corporate money and biases in the legacy media, nor by the deranging effects of algorithms, the way that they express themselves in new social media. So there's that third thing where you have to ensure that whatever capacity you hand people like me, it's not such a floodgate of sexy ad revenue that I end up suckling on a teat that contaminates the whole space and makes the whole space feel clickbaity.
100%.
Yeah. Hamish, any thoughts?
No teat suckling. We'll put that in the fine print.
I like the fact that Hamish, you are basically a proxy for the viewer at this point, where I can tell by looking at your face whether or not the conversation is interesting or not. So I think so far Chris is doing a bang up job, because you look pretty interested.
He's doing a good job here. Thank you. I'm glad to know that I look very interested. It's obviously a good front I'm putting up.
Yeah, you're actually.
It's actually an AI avatar. We just send a prompt like, look really interesting.
I've been out of the room for 10 minutes.
That's right. Yeah. There are cat videos playing inside your head, which you're finding very interesting at the moment. Hamish, is there something that people and investors and other kind of Silicon Valley types have thrown around about the possible future evolution of Substack that you just find yourself being resistant and allergic to? Like, is there a way of monetizing it that you're like, ugh, if that ever happened, I would not be a happy chappy?
Yeah, I mean, we've had conversations with investors who have decided not to work with, who do not really see what Substack is really about or what's special about it, who would be inclined to just load it up with programmatic ads, that kind of thing, which would destroy what sits at the root of Substack, which is this foundation built on direct relationships, on creators having ownership and control of their own destiny, and with the platform only succeeding when the creators succeed. So it's pretty easy to spot when you encounter it, and those conversations never go very far. And so we're very intentional and careful about the investors that we do work with, and we're never going to work with the ones that don't fully demonstrate that they truly understand what's special about Substack.
Wasn't one of those potential investors Elon Musk? Did he try to buy you at some point? Or was
Elon Musk did try to buy us, and
he floated the idea anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I won't say like he sort of made an offer in conversation, but without specifics. And on the face of it, is a tempting idea to fuse the distribution power of Twitter with the creator power of Substack. But that is an example of something we decided not to pursue because it ran the huge risk of breaking what's special about Substack, breaking the fundamental Substack model. Because Twitter is still barely now, but still an ads. It's still an ads-based business and a closed.
There are a lot of ways that sentence could have ended, Hamish. Twitter is now a ... Fill in the blank. That's like a party game. Yeah. Cesspool of horrors.
Twitter's many things to many people, and we all love it. But
our porn waifu is coming soon for Substack. No, it's not.
The basic point is that it's a fundamentally different system with different goals to Substack, and we were not willing to strap Substack to that and compromise the foundational vision of Substack, which is about giving power to creators and to consumers who can then vote with their money to shape the culture that they want to thrive. And so we're committed to continuing to build Substack according to that original vision. Something like that would have compromised it.
Yeah. Chris and Hamish are with us, the co-founders of Substack. Guys, you have you've changed so many people's lives like mine. I was talking to I think it was Sam Harris about the fact that there are huge new blockbuster publications on places like Substack, and that's what everyone focuses on when they talk about the decline of the legacy media. But what gets less attention is this new middle class of creators, of whom I count myself one. I'm not a global name. But I make more money from Substack than I did work when I had a daily talkback radio show in the legacy media. And that was within 2 months of being sort of cancelled from my own show. And the ability of people to tell legacy media outlets, of good creators to tell legacy media outlets to fuck off, I think it has ramifications even inside the legacy media, because now editors and managers are aware that they don't have a chokehold on you. And so everybody has a little bit of a big swinging dick if they have a bit of a platform and a bit of an audience and they're producing something that people like. So thank you on my behalf and from everybody. I'm not sure if you're aware of how much of a life-changing thing it's really been to bring into existence this thing that everyone sort of knew was possible but hadn't quite done.
Thank you. It's the greatest thrill we get is seeing the people who come on Substack and build new things and succeed doing it. And it is easy to get distracted from that core truth when there's so much other chatter around. So it's always really gratifying to hear someone come out and say it directly to our faces.
Yeah,
so
it's great. It's No worries. I mean, my kids have a more relaxed and less stressed out father as a result of the fact that this platform exists. How do we see so we've talked about Chris, when you were originally kind of coming up with Substack as like a newsletter thing, did you take some coaxing or cajoling to think about audio and video? I'm just interested in the trajectory of the conceit.
No, it's very funny. Like, we actually started the company with, I would say, the most grandiose version of the idea. Like, the origin of the company was, I was trying my own hand at writing because I've always been an avid reader. I've always been an avid media consumer. I think that the things we read and watch and listen to shape us. It's not just a way you spend your life. It changes who you are. And so, conversations, ideas, they're valuable. And I had the good like programmer's hubris where I was like, I could write. I know how to type. I know how to have ideas. How hard could this be? And so I started writing what I thought was going to be like an essay or a blog post or something, like outlining my frustrations with the media economy on the internet. Basically going, wah, wah, wah. The internet came along and smashed a lot of the existing business models for media. And the things that have replaced it, these networks, they're working great from their perspective, but they're driving us fucking nuts. Wah, wah, wah. I'm like complaining in this thing. And I sent it to Hamish because he's my friend who's actually a writer and knows about this stuff. And he let me down very gently. He's like, dude, it's 2017 and your great insight in this like blog post you're writing is like, oh, newspapers are in trouble and like legacy media businesses are in trouble. And, maybe Facebook is not an unalloyed good. I hate to break it to you, but like everybody knows this. And like, this is not news to those of us in the industry. But the more interesting question, if you want to make this essay not boring, here's what you have to do. You have to say what you should do about it. Like, how could this be different? Let's assume that all of these things you're whining about are real problems. What could you do? And we started arguing about that. And we came up with, even back then, even before it was a company, what I would say is kind of like the big vision for Substack, which is, look, we're making this new economic engine for culture. And, if the world needs a renaissance, which I think it does, the people who are going to create that are not technologists like me. It's going to be people like you that are making the culture, that are, have independent voices, who are having thoughts, having ideas, having conversations, writing, podcasting, making videos, making new kinds of media that maybe we haven't even explored yet. And the people who are like investing their time and energy and money to support those things, who are living in the culture. Like, that's where the magic is going to come from. And to the extent that we have something to contribute, the thing that we can contribute is like this, we can be sort of like the arms dealer for these people in some ways, right? We can give you like the technology and the tools and the network that gives like you the fighting chance to sort of like win and make this thing. And so this was always like from the very beginning, we were thinking like, this is going to be multimedia. It's going to be a network. It's going to be like YouTube. It's going to be like something like this that has all these properties. And then the reason that we started, with the smallest possible instantiation is because when you're making something really big and ambitious, you can't boil the ocean. You kind of have to like, in nerd speak, we call it like the MVP, the minimum viable product. You have to find like the smallest version of the thing that could possibly work. And it's better to be something that's like, really, really, really good and valuable for like a very small number of people, and then gradually expand the number of people it's great for. Because if you start with something that's kind of like just okay for millions of people, nobody cares. But if you make something that's like the greatest thing in the world for a small handful of people, that gives you like a place to start. And the idea of Substack as like a, paid email newsletter platform is just the smallest possible instantiation, the kernel of this much larger idea. And so we sort of self-consciously like started here and worked over a period of years to grow this bigger thing.
That's interesting. Scoot just just commented something that was exactly what I was thinking, which is that newsletters are to the internet what books are to Amazon. In a sense that what you were just saying is not dissimilar to Jeff Bezos's original conceit, which was just ship things that are very, very easy to ship. Like start with the minimum viable product. Actually, like a book is easy to store. It doesn't go off. there's a lot of you're not buying this analogy,
I
but
think there is some truth to that.
Start
in
with
that
what's easy, and then you can end up shipping tomatoes at the end of the day. But like, don't start with tomatoes. Start with books.
That's true. And the only difference I would quibble is to say, well, the thing that Amazon ended up being is this everything store, right? And the fact that books are a form of media was almost like incidental to that. It was literally, it's like, this keeps better than tomatoes. Whereas, we're trying to make this new economic engine for culture. Our focus has always been media and culture. And so that like writing is a core piece of that. It's not like incidentally we did writing, but we're going to turn into like a tomato store, right? Writing is sort of, and it's like ideas and media are the core of it. So it's maybe less tenuous of a connection.
Now you're just tempting me to start a Substack about tomatoes, exclusively about the delivery of tomatoes, the different kinds of tomatoes, the different pronunciations of tomatoes. We're with Chris and Hamish, the co-founders of Substack, talking to us about the future of Substack, the vision of the company, and how it is revolutionizing the legacy media. I'm Josh Szeps. This will be an episode of Uncomfortable Conversations, which you should subscribe to. An excellent Substack, and it's also going out as an episode of Szeps Live, which is what we call it when we're going live. One thing that I'm conflicted about all the time, guys, is the question about free speech online. I think about it with Twitter. I think about it with riots in the UK. I'm frequently asked in Australia to sort of present the pro-free speech kind of American version of thinking, because in an Australian context, I'm regarded as a wild free speech absolutist, even though I'm regarded in the United States as being an anti-free speech nincompoop for thinking that First Amendment attitudes towards speech should not extend to every single place in the universe, that sometimes you just want a nice cozy living room. You don't necessarily want a town square where everybody is shrieking crazy ideas at the top of their lungs. How are you wrestling with that?
I think it's a really interesting topic. I think one of that dynamic that you just outlined, right, where there's like, in some, you could argue in some sense that there's a tension there between what I would think of it as like freedom and civilization. Right, where it's like, hey, if we're gonna have this idea of free speech and a free press that many people believe, that I certainly believe is crucial to a free society, that if you're gonna have that thing, that means as a consequence that you must go on Twitter and get yelled at by insane people that curse at you, and you just have you have to live your life in this way where you're like having these horrible experiences. And I think many people conflate those things on both sides, right? On both sides, you get people that say that those things are sort of inextricably linked. And one of the things that I think we are doing and can do with Substack, I hope we can do with Substack, is show that you actually can have both those things at the same time. You can have a robust defense of freedom of the press. You can have the idea that you can host a Substack and talk about a very wide range of things, including things that people find deeply objectionable or offensive or wrong. And yet you don't have to descend into kind of like a horrible hellscape experience for everybody. And in fact, you can have like a liberal society where people can discuss every idea, and you can actually have a discourse environment that gets stronger and better because of that. I do think that that's something that we can help build. I think that we have been working on that. We've made real progress. I'd say it's not perfect, but that's kind of where we're coming from on these issues.
I do suspect there's a different intuition about this out inside the United States versus in other Anglophone countries. And I noticed that none of us is American. Chris, you're Canadian. I'm Australian. Hamish, you're from, who knows? A tiny country off the coast of Australia. Is that
Don't worry about
right?
it. Yes. Doesn't even appear on maps.
Somewhere in the South Pacific.
Everybody we meet thinks he's Australian, and I get to see him die a little bit inside when that happens.
I know. I'm sorry about that. New Zealanders are better. I'm actually going there in a couple of weeks because I don't know if you know, but I might have mentioned it in the past. My mum's a Kiwi. So my daughter has all of her cousins over there. So we're going horse riding on Muriwai Beach with the cousins. Beautiful. Black sand beach. Anyway, 3 people watching have heard of Muriwai Beach. Everybody else has no idea what we're talking about. But I do wonder whether or not you bring to the conversation about what sort of speech should be allowed a different attitude than the move fast and break things, American superhero kind of like just say whatever the fuck you want to all the time, and them crazy losers, snowflakes can go fuck themselves. Like, is Substack different, or is it we are just going to tolerate all kinds of ideas and never put our thumb on the scale, even if they're really beyond the pale?
I think the magic here is you can have a platform that does have a really robust commitment to freedom of the press and decentralizes how the moderation works into, like you mentioned your living room, right? I should be able to have a cozy living room. And you can that is how it should work, right? You should be able to have, be in a country where you aren't threatened with arrest for espousing bad political views, or, that are protected. You have civil liberties to say the things you want to say, but that doesn't mean that, like, you have to invite everybody into your living room to
I see.
to lecture you. And then the question is just like, well, whose living room is it, and how does the living room work online? And I think,
but you don't think that there's a role for the government in, some countries will say in Germany you can't have an anti-Semitic living room. You're even in the privacy. Well, actually, I'm not sure that's true. Can you hang a swastika in the privacy of your own home in Germany? I don't know. You can't put a swastika in your window, right, so that passers-by can see it. And you can't say, like, come in here to discuss, Nazi stuff, and have people just coming up and knocking on your door. Because the government has said that's not the kind of society that we want, even inside the privacy of your own living room, you're not allowed to be promoting that stuff. That's where the rubber meets the road on a platform like Substack. Like, do you want it to be a terrain of total intellectual freedom, or do you want to get into the business of saying these ideas are so far beyond the pale that we're not going to tolerate them on our site?
I think, we take a stance that's pretty strongly in favor of freedom of the press, right? We want to have a very broad remit. We do have rules at the very extremes, but they're deliberately designed in a way that's sort of like allows for a very, very broad range of stuff, including stuff that people find deeply offensive. We do follow local laws. That's a thing we have to do. But our view on this is, in general, I'm not going to wade into like what should countries do, because that's a thing I'm not an expert on. I think, but like, maybe another way to look at this is like, what should platforms do? And I would say that in the 2010s, we had this great experiment where we said, okay, there are bad things in the world. There's bad ideas in the world. There are nasty things that happen. And the right way to solve this problem is we will take these massive global scale networks run by technologists like me, and we'll say, okay, it's your job to make sure that people don't say bad things on here. And if there's bad speech that's happening, if there's bad ideas that are happening, if there's bad politics that's happening, the right answer is we're going to give a ton of power to Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or whoever's running, Chris Best, whoever's running this platform. And you should be like the government of Germany or whatever and say, you should wade in and only allow things that are good or right, or ban the things that are bad. And I think you could have a deep philosophical discussion about, like, is that right? Is that wrong? Is that a good way to do it? One thing that I think I would argue is quite clear is if you have the question of, like, did it work? Did that actually help? Did that stop the spread of those ideas? Did that lead to a higher trust, higher information density society? My view is it did not work. And it was, in fact, counterproductive. And the theory of the case that says the best way to combat bad ideas and bad politics is to, like, exert a heavy hand of censorship at the platform level, I just don't think that idea has a track record of success.
You're watching Szeps Live. I'm Josh Szeps, speaking with the co-founders of Substack, Hamish and Chris, about their latest, well, ostensibly off the back of their latest funding round, which valued the company for the first time at more than $1 billion, about the future of this platform, where they see it going and where it has come from. Subscribe to Uncomfortable Conversations for twice weekly episodes, not with people quite as interesting as Chris and Hamish, but sometimes half as interesting. Hamish, where do you see the sort of future of the legacy media? I sometimes wrestle with this myself. Like, what is the value in let's say Substack achieves all of the things that you want it to. and in 15 or 20 years, we're living in an almost unrecognizable media ecosystem. Is there a place for legacy media and public media for you?
For the ones who can adapt and survive, there surely will be. But the New York Times is not going to go away. You could say the New York Times is legacy media pretty confidently. But I don't think we should operate from the assumption that the institutions that were built 100 years ago in the context of 100 years ago with business models that made sense for that time are automatically just going to continue and thrive in a new context 100 years later after the internet has arrived. And so I think there is what I actually am very confident of is that there is a bright future for journalism, let's call it that. And that there will be new institutions that arise to support and uphold quality journalism that is built on the same standards and ethics of the previous generation of institutions that supported journalism. In the same way that as the railroads were being supplanted or surpassed by roading networks, transport didn't go away. In fact, it became more diverse and more interesting, could reach more places, and became more valuable as an entire network. And so I feel really
more entertaining if you factor in TikTok videos of people getting attacked on Delta flights and getting into fisticuffs at the gate.
And road trips are like so much more interesting and accessible than they were in the pre-automobile era. And so I feel like I would love for legacy media institutions to be able to adapt to the new world and look at Substack, for example, as a place to build on, like new land where new media products can be built. But the thing I really the thing I really care about is in this transitional state, does journalism get protected and upheld, and can that be supported in a way where it can really thrive? And I absolutely think it can, even if Substack is the only thing that is left standing at the end of all of this. But I don't think Substack's going to be the only thing left standing. There'll be other models to support good journalism as well.
One of the things that I worry about at the same time as being a beneficiary of this evolution in media is, the two main things would be investigative journalism. So the kind of journalism that is not commentary on things, but is the actual uncovering of corruption in City Hall in a medium-sized city in the Midwest or something like that, let alone foreign bureaus. And editors, having worked in a newsroom and having worked at the public broadcaster in Australia and sort of having been trained in the conventional way of doing things, there's an enormous utility to having editors to hack apart your copy and tighten it. And I wonder whether or not you've ever thought about, this is actually just occurring to me now, but a lot of the writing on Substack is understandably a little bit long-winded and sloppy occasionally because of the lack of editors. I can imagine...
Name names. Who are you talking about?
Me.
What is it? Is this the 67th minute of this conversation?
You're lucky you guys are getting away with less than 3 hours, I'm telling you. No, but I mean, I could imagine having an option where you have community editors who are paid positions that is an opt-in for creators, where you could pay a monthly fee and you could have advice and editing and even just someone to bounce around ideas with, who is someone who's been pilfered from the New York Times or the Washington Post or something like that, who is an in-house Substack editor who can assist people with tightening their writing, checking their sources, and that could be an opt-in to facilitate real journalism versus commentary.
Well, it doesn't necessarily, that's an interesting model. It doesn't necessarily have to be in-house to Substack. There's a new ecosystem emerging here, basically, that can support journalism, that can support media, entertainment, whatever the thing being created and shared is. And we're in the early innings of it. So there are institutions already being built on Substack today that have editors and all this kind of legal and structural support that you'd otherwise get from a newspaper back in the day or a TV station back in the day, like Zeteo, like Dropsite News, like the Free Press, like the Bulwark. And these, Substack is kind of 8 years old. It really started to get on people's radar, I think, around in the pandemic. And so this is new still, and new institutions take time to build, and a new ecosystem takes time to develop. But I can there already are editors who offer their services to writers on Substack at particular charge out rates that they determine, and the writers choose whether or not to work with them, how much to work with them. There are already like artists who will do illustrations and photography for these places as well. And I know of efforts underway to create a more like support structure, the sort of soft infrastructure that good media institutions and media practitioners need to do better than the minimum. And I think we're going to see all sorts of expressions of that in the future that could, and like the model is the platform, Substack as a platform is totally accommodating of those new models. And I'm excited to see that emerge a bit. And I think the thing that we're mostly waiting for on that front are the entrepreneurs, like the people who are going to come and build these new things, whether they're making the media themselves or they're building the support structure to support these emerging businesses. And we have kickstarted some of that. Like we have provided subsidized editors to people in the past, subsidized healthcare to people in different stages. But I think ultimately people should not really look to the platform to provide that kind of stuff. They should look to an ecosystem of services and a rich kind of emerging economy to find new ways forward.
Right, but you can choose to make the platform as proactive or non-proactive in that space as you want to, if you want to foster that sense of community and journalistic mission.
Yeah, and we do, like, we bring people together in events. We host happy hours. We do a lot of educational stuff. We work with certain creators one-on-one to help them figure out what a smart launch strategy would be, or what's the best way to think about what's paid and what's not paid, all that kind of stuff. But you don't want to overstep the line, I think. You don't want to start assuming the role effectively as publisher, where you start to have responsibility for or ownership or benefit from the content itself. It's important to preserve the ownership of the creators and the publishers themselves, and where we can be a facilitator rather than an overlord.
Yeah. It's also probably important in terms of honoring the free speech principles that Chris was talking to earlier, that if you want to be able to if you want to have some distance between you and the creators, then you have to have that distance.
Can I say one thing about the investigative journalism point you raised?
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting one, because this is a meme I hear a lot. It's like, oh, you can't do real journalism on Substack. You can't break real stories. You can't do investigative stuff. I think there's an element of truth to that. And the element of truth that there is sometimes doing that kind of work takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of time, or it takes money. And it can be a real, digging in and doing a really great job breaking some powerful story is something that takes investment. And if you're an independent media organization of any kind, building up to the point where you have the resources to invest in that is a real task. So I think that piece of it is true. The other piece, though, is, does that stuff work on Substack? And the answer to that is unequivocally yes. One of the things that is what some of the biggest subscription drivers, the things that drive people to growth and success, is if you're breaking an important story, if you're, telling something that's important, the result of doing important investigative journalism, that stuff really does work on the platform. It's something that people
That's true, but I wouldn't
people.
allow. I mean, I concede that point, but I also wouldn't allow yourself to get too starry-eyed about that, because although the sexy big blockbuster stories will do well on the platform, there is a category of loss-leading investigative journalism that you sort of needed newsrooms and trainee journalists and interns to learn how to do, which involved sitting in a bar for a very long time and chatting up, making conversation with the Undersecretary of Agriculture, who pops in there and is having an affair with one of the so-and-sos, and then you just end up with a Rolodex of a lot of people, and old newspapers were able to subsidize that. It doesn't mean
But Josh, there's nothing. I completely understand and believe in all those values as well, and have a traditional media background and a big believer in investigative journalism. Know that it doesn't really bring in the cash all the time, but costs a lot of money to produce, and is really important to a functioning society. But I actually don't think that there's anything different about the Substack platform compared to other platforms people would have built. The old institutions that supported investigative journalism from the past were. In fact, I think there are big advantages. It's much easier to start an operation on Substack that is mostly about journalism and less about the the backroom office, the administration, the sales team, that sort of stuff. There's a business model that works and supports that. Like the subscription model does scale. Like an individual living off subscriptions might hit a ceiling. You sort of like in the low millions or something like that. But new institutions can be built that do generate a ton of revenue from subscriptions so that they can actually fund that type of work if they choose to, and if they want to make that central to the brand of what they're building or central to the mission of what they're trying to build. And I just don't, and if other business models and other lines for making money come on online on Substack, or even if they choose to do it off Substack, the platform itself is at least as flexible as the old platform, which used to be like get delivery trucks and a printing press and a huge sales team. Like they figured out how to support investigative journalism in that model 100 years ago with all the disadvantages of that time. I think people are going to be able to figure it out with this model and this platform too.
Hamish and Chris are with us. I'm going to let you go in just a moment, guys. This is Szeps Live. I'm Josh Szeps. You should subscribe to Uncomfortable Conversations for more fascinating conversations about some of the things that make people uncomfortable if you were to express a strident opinion about them at a work event or a barbecue or a pub or a bar. This is an episode of Szeps Live. We're streaming live on Substack. Chris, the last piece of the puzzle for me in terms of journalism and creating a flourishing civilization where we have a whole bunch of different ideas is avoiding echo chambers and avoiding this sort of, foggy curation that we can blunder into without quite knowing it, which doesn't expose us to a bunch of different ideas. And I was on a panel television show in Australia recently called Q&A with Australia's e-safety commissioner, a person who Elon Musk calls Australia's censorship czar or commissar or something, because he's so nuanced about stuff like this. And I got into an argument with her in which I was basically saying the problem is coming back to this conversation about algorithms, the way that social media companies are measuring their own success, and you're not going to overcome that by government fiat. You're going to overcome that probably by collaborating with social media companies about how they define success. And one really interesting solution that a social media reform advocate was talking about, she was a Facebook whistleblower, was saying we should be looking, for example, at the number of people who are following people who are not followed by other people who they follow. In other words, the number of brand new links. Instead of measuring the success of a network as being just, this person connects to this person, are we actually fostering an expansive worldview by privileging new parts of the network that, aren't an obvious A, B, C, D, E, but are going from A to E? Now, I don't know how you would do that, but is this part of the conversation at Substack about, it's great that I can curate my own universe and that I'm not being deranged by algorithms, but there is still the temptation for me to only follow people who agree with me, and it's just easier instinctively for me not to constantly be challenged. How do we create a system that encourages and incentivizes us to think broadly?
One thing that gives me a lot of courage on this front is I do think, when you look at what people will choose to subscribe to and pay for, you can look through kind of like the notes that people send when they pay for a Substack. A very common sentiment is, hey, I don't always agree with what you say, or even I disagree with a lot of what you say, but I find you really interesting and valuable. And that is a sentiment that people have, right? I think when people think not just like, what am I going to click on or scroll through, but they think, when I make a conscious decision of how I want to build my media environment, am I going to choose to subscribe to some things that challenge me or that get me a different perspective? I think the empirical results we see is that people do choose that with some frequency. At the end of the day, we can't force you to. I'm not going to be like, you have to subscribe to this thing that you hate. But I think when given the choice in a good way, a lot of people do want to expand the range of voices that they're hearing from. They want to get perspectives that they value, that they think are, authentic and interesting and good faith, but are not necessarily just coming from the exact place they're coming from. And I would say that to me, the biggest problem with the sort of the algorithm bubble thing, the social media incentive structure, is not even just the echo chamber, but it's the polarizing effects. because what the algorithm finds you on X is not only a bubble of people that exactly agree with you. It's a bubble of people that are in one tribe, your tribe, and then it finds the things that are maximally outraging and maximally angering and maximally othering to the people outside of that. That's actually how you foster engagement if you're just going for engagement.
Yeah.
If you just had a bubble of everybody agreeing, you would actually get bored of that very quickly. Right? That's
true.
That's
yes,
not
no,
what
I take your point, but when it comes to time to make decisions about how algorithms, for example, are going to suggest something to me on the basis of the other things that I subscribe to, it would be super cool, and maybe we'll get to a point at which maybe AI can already do this, and it's just a matter of deploying it for this. It would be super cool if the suggestions that a platform like Substack made factored in a question of whether or not the thing that it's suggesting is unusual or innovative or an outlier in some way. Like, rather than being, well, I follow Sam Harris and Barry Weiss, therefore I'm also going to like Andrew Sullivan. There might be a way for an AI to look at the kind of stuff that some of the people who follow those people are most excited about through their browsing patterns, or spending more time exploring, or, so that there's a bias put towards discovery rather than the reinforcing of the most obvious patterns. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just putting that out there as something to consider.
I think that's something you can do that a bit with the technology, but I think another piece of that is like just the human element. Like, that's a really good place for curation for, I say, hey, you should check this thing out. You get that like humans putting people onto things. That's a good way to do kind of like that creative. It's when you want to take a leap, right? If there's something that's like, hey, this is not the kind of thing that's normally up your alley, but like it's worth you checking out. It's actually better to hear that from a person than an algorithm a lot of the time.
Ideally. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to let you guys go and enjoy the beautiful San Francisco summer evening. Does something happen in San Francisco when you make $1 billion? Like, when you become $1 billion company, does Gavin Newsom come over and give you a blowjob? Do you get a key to the city? What happens?
I assume the politicians just hate you more.
Does your life change?
Nothing has happened. We had a nice little happy hour for our own company. And,
in San Francisco, that's a Tuesday, unfortunately.
That's right. That's right.
No, we're still waiting for the blowjobs. So if just direct them to Sansom Street and Jackson Square.
Yep, fabulous. All right, I'll be on to Mr. Newsom imminently. Chris, Hamish, thank you so much.
Thank you. We both have Substacks, by the way. Subscribe to us too, and subscribe to us.
Yeah, subscribe. Always one for a plug. Subscribe to Uncomfortable Conversations. Subscribe to Chris's Substack. Subscribe to Hamish's
I tell
Substack.
other people to do it, so I have to do it too.
Tell everybody. Also, Apple iTunes, like click and subscribe on YouTube, and like leave us a comment, because forget about it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, boys.
Thank you, Josh.
Take care.
Cheers.
See ya. Cheers. Have a good one. Bye.